You know what quietly pushes a man away without you even realizing it? It's not always the big arguments or the dramatic blow-ups. Sometimes it's something much smaller, something that feels harmless in the moment, like the urge to overcorrect. You might not even notice when you're doing it. Maybe it starts with a little nudge, telling him the right way to load the dishwasher, or correcting the way he retells a story because a detail was off, or reminding him mid-sentence that he mispronounced a word. On the surface it feels tiny, almost playful, but here's the thing, when those little corrections stack up over time, they don't feel small to him anymore. They start to send a silent message, and the message is, "You're not good enough the way you are." See, men don't usually translate correction as help. They translate it as judgment, and nobody wants to feel like they're being judged at home, especially in the one place where they hope to feel accepted. Every time it happens, it chips away at his confidence, at his willingness to show up fully. What begins as a light-hearted adjustment, "Hey, don't do it like that, do it like this," over time starts to feel like you can't do anything right. He may not even say it out loud. Men rarely do, but instead he pulls back. He talks less. He risks less. And he withdraws emotionally, not because he doesn't care, but because it feels safer than stepping into a space where he thinks he'll be corrected again. Now, let me be clear. There's nothing wrong with giving input. There's nothing wrong with expressing what you like. But there's a huge difference between sharing your preference and consistently pointing out what he's doing wrong. One builds connection, the other builds walls. The truth is, men don't need you to agree with everything they do. What they crave is the freedom to figure things out on their own. That sense of trust tells him, "I believe in you, even if you mess it up sometimes." And when he feels that, he doesn't just stay. He leans in harder. He tries more. He shows up with more energy, more consistency, because he feels safe in your belief in him. Think about it. Imagine if the roles were reversed. Imagine if every time you shared a story, he jumped in with corrections. Every time you did something around the house, he pointed out a better way. At first, maybe you'd brush it off, but eventually, wouldn't it make you second? Guess yourself. Wouldn't you start to feel like nothing you do is ever enough? That's exactly what happens to him. It's not about the dishwasher or the story. It's about the emotional weight of never quite measuring up. So what's the alternative? It's simple, but not always easy. Let him lead sometimes. Let him do things his way, even if it's not your way. Even if you could do it faster, cleaner, more efficiently. Because sometimes it's not about the result. It's about the feeling of being trusted. And if he loads the dishwasher differently, or folds the laundry his own way, or tells a story with the details slightly off, let it go. Trust me, in the long run, that choice of silence, that choice of acceptance, is worth far more than having the towel folded just right. Because here's the bottom line, men don't fall in love with correction. They fall in love with acceptance. They don't pull away because you spoke your mind. They pull away because the constant corrections tell them their mind doesn't matter. And when a man starts to feel like he's never enough, he doesn't argue. He retreats. So if you want him to stay close, if you want him to lean in, start noticing the moments when correction sneaks in. Replace them with trust. Replace them with belief. Replace them with silence that says, "You don't have to be perfect for me to love you." That silence, that trust, is louder than any correction you could ever give. One of the most common behaviors that quietly pushes a man away is emotional overdependence. And let me be clear, there's nothing wrong with leaning on your partner. That's part of what a relationship is about. But there's a line between sharing your emotions and relying on him to manage them for you. And when that line gets crossed, it creates a weight he might not even know how to put into words. He just feels it. He feels it in the heaviness of every conversation, in the pressure of being the only source of your calm, in the responsibility of carrying emotions that were never meant to rest entirely on his shoulders. Here's what happens. At first, he wants to be there for you. He wants to comfort you when you're upset, reassure you when you're anxious, and support you when you're down. That's natural and it's healthy. But when it becomes constant, when every wave of emotion is handed directly to him to fix, he doesn't just feel needed, he starts to feel drained. Because now, instead of being your partner, he feels like he's become your emotional regulator, your safety net, your source of balance every single time life gets rough. And it's not that he doesn't care. It's that no man, no person, can be that for someone else without eventually running empty. Think about it like this. Imagine you're both carrying backpacks. In a healthy relationship, you take turns carrying the heavy stuff. Sometimes his pack is heavier, and you step in with support. Sometimes yours is heavier, and he's there to lighten the load. That's partnership. But emotional overdependence is like handing him your backpack every single day, saying, "Here, carry mine too." At first, he might not complain. But eventually that extra weight wears him down, and what happens when people are tired? They pull back. They look for relief, and without realizing it, you've created the very distance you were trying to avoid. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but isn't vulnerability important? Isn't sharing how I feel part of intimacy? And yes, it absolutely is. Vulnerability is powerful. The difference is vulnerability invites connection, while emotional overdependence demands rescue. One says, "I trust you enough to share this with you." The other says, "I need you to fix this for me." And over time, that shift changes everything. Vulnerability builds closeness. Overdependence builds pressure. Here's the truth. Men are wired to protect, to provide, to step up when needed. But they also want to feel like their partner has her own strength, her own center, her own emotional foundation. Because when he sees that you can steady yourself, he feels safer stepping in to support you, not because he has to, but because he wants to. That's the difference. Nobody wants to feel like they're someone's only lifeline. But everyone wants to feel like they're someone's chosen support, and let me flip this for perspective. Imagine if every time your partner had a bad day, he came home and poured it all on you, expecting you to carry his stress, fix his insecurities, calm his every fear. At first, you'd show up, but if it became the only rhythm of the relationship, you'd start to feel exhausted too. It's not because you don't love him. It's because love can't survive when one person carries all the weight. So what does this mean for you? It means learning how to soothe yourself in the small moments. It means having friendships, passions, and outlets outside the relationship. It means letting him in, but not handing him everything. Because the moments you show him you can breathe on your own are the same moments he feels drawn closer, not out of obligation, but out of admiration. That balance keeps attraction alive. It keeps respect alive. And most importantly, it keeps love alive, because in the end, a man doesn't stay because you need him. He stays because you want him. Keeping score in a relationship is one of those habits that can feel justified in the moment, but quietly eats away at the bond you're trying to build. And I get it. You want fairness. You want balance. You want to know that your effort is being seen and matched. But the truth is, when every mistake, every missed opportunity, every forgotten task is recorded and brought back up, love stops feeling like love and starts feeling like a transaction. Instead of being partners, you turn into competitors, keeping a tally sheet of who did what and who failed where. Here's how it usually plays out. Something small happens. Maybe he forgets to take out the trash. Maybe he doesn't text back as quickly as you'd like. Maybe he misses a detail that was important to you. And instead of letting it be one moment, it gets stored. It goes into that invisible mental file cabinet labeled "Things He Owes Me For." And when the next conflict comes up, that file gets pulled out. Suddenly, the conversation isn't about what just happened. It's about every single time he fell short. You stack them up like evidence, and whether you realize it or not, the message he hears is, you're never enough, no matter what you do. Now, men might not always argue back when that happens. Sometimes they'll just go quiet. But make no mistake, silence doesn't mean it didn't land. It means it did. It means he's pulling back because he doesn't see a way to win. Think about it. If every effort is met with a reminder of where he failed last time, what motivation does he have to keep trying? Why keep playing a game where the scoreboard always shows him behind? That's how keeping score turns into distance. It's not the trash, it's not the text, it's not the small things. It's the weight of never being able to reset, never being able to start fresh. And let's be honest, we've all been guilty of it at some point. It comes from wanting accountability, from wanting to feel valued. But here's the problem. Love isn't built on balance sheets. It's built on grace. Grace for the fact that both of you will get it wrong sometimes. Grace for the fact that neither of you will ever measure up to perfection. And grace for the fact that keeping track of who owes what doesn't bring you closer. It pushes you apart. Think about the moments when someone gave you grace, when you made a mistake, and instead of throwing it back in your face, they let it go. Didn't that make you want to do better next time? Didn't it make you appreciate them more? That's the power of not keeping score. It creates an environment where effort is noticed, not just mistakes, where the relationship feels like a partnership, not a performance review. And when a man feels that, when he feels trusted to get it wrong sometimes without it being used as a weapon later, he doesn't pull away. He leans in because he feels safe. So here's the shift. Instead of holding on to every shortcoming, start recognizing the efforts, even the imperfect ones. Instead of saying, "You didn't do this last week," say, "I see that you tried today." It doesn't mean you ignore patterns that hurt you, but it does mean you stop tallying up the little things that don't matter in the long run. Because no one wants to come home to a scorecard. They want to come home to a partner. And at the end of the day, men don't stay where they feel constantly reminded of their failures. They stay where they feel their efforts are seen, their mistakes are forgiven, and the scoreboard doesn't even exist. One of the fastest ways to make a man shut down, even if he doesn't say it out loud, is public criticism or comparison. And sometimes it doesn't even feel like criticism in the moment. Maybe it's just a joke, a little jab, or a passing comment that you think is harmless. Maybe it's comparing him to someone else, an other man, a friend's husband, even your own family member, because you think it might motivate him. But what it really does is cut deep into the very thing men value most in a relationship: respect. For men, respect isn't optional. It's the foundation they stand on. And while they may not always demand it out loud, they feel its absence immediately. When you criticize him in private, it stings, but at least it's between the two of you. When you criticize him in public, whether it's in front of friends, family, coworkers, or even strangers, it hits differently. It doesn't just bruise his ego, it tells him, "I can't trust you to protect my dignity." And that's not something a man forgets quickly. The same goes for comparison. When you say things like, "Why can't you be more like him?" or "Look at how he treats her," you might think you're pointing out a standard or giving an example. But what he hears is, "You're not measuring up, and I'm looking elsewhere for what I want." And once that seed is planted, insecurity grows. Instead of feeling inspired to do better, he feels defeated before he even begins, because no man wants to compete for his place in your life against someone else's shadow. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Sometimes women use humor as a way to vent their frustrations. A sarcastic comment at a dinner table, a playful dig in front of friends, and sure, It gets a laugh, but here's the thing. While everyone else might laugh, he's not laughing inside. He's filing it away as another moment where he felt exposed instead of supported, and the more it happens, the less safe he feels being himself around you, because if his mistakes become punchlines, he'll stop showing up with honesty. This isn't about never speaking up or swallowing your feelings. It's about timing and delivery. There's a time to address something that bothers you, and that time is in private, with honesty and kindness. Pull him aside, talk it through, give him the chance to hear you without the weight of an audience. When you do that, you're not just protecting his pride, you're protecting the trust between you. And trust grows when a man knows his partner has his back, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. And let me flip this around for perspective. Imagine you're out with friends, and he starts pointing out your flaws in front of them. Maybe it's about how you look. Maybe it's about how you handled something at home. Even if he says he's joking, how would that land? Wouldn't it make you feel small, maybe even embarrassed? Wouldn't it change how you show up around him next time? That's exactly what happens to him. It's not about sensitivity. It's about the simple human truth that nobody wants to feel undermined by the person they trust most. At the end of the day, men don't need perfection from you. They don't need you to agree with everything they do. What they need is respect, especially when other people are watching. And when you protect that, when you choose private correction over public criticism, when you choose trust over comparison, you don't just keep him close, you make him feel like he's standing next to someone who truly sees his worth. Because the truth is, a man doesn't pull away when he feels respected. He pulls away when the one person he wants respect from the most is the one who takes it away. Testing instead of trusting is one of those behaviors that often comes from a place of insecurity, but it ends up creating the very distance you're afraid of. It shows up in little ways, asking questions you already know the answer to just to see if he'll be honest, withholding affection to measure how hard he'll work to earn it back, or creating scenarios to find out if he'll pass some invisible loyalty test. On the surface, it might feel like you're protecting yourself, like you're making sure his feelings are real. But in reality, those tests don't build trust, they erode it. And over time, they make a man feel like no matter what he does, it will never be enough. Here's why this matters. Trust is the foundation of intimacy. Without it, everything else starts to crack. When you test a man, what you're really saying is, I don't believe you, I don't believe in us, and I need proof before I give you more of me. And while that might feel safe in the short term, it actually creates long-term instability, because love doesn't grow in an environment where one person always feels like they're on trial. Think about how exhausting that is from his perspective. Imagine walking into a relationship where every action might be questioned, every word might be doubted, and every decision might be checked against an unspoken set of rules. At first, he might try harder to pass the tests. He might jump through hoops to prove his intentions, but eventually he'll stop, not because he doesn't care, but because living under suspicion drains the joy out of connection. He starts to think, what's the point of giving my all if it's never trusted? And that's when distance starts to grow. And now, I understand where this comes from. Maybe you've been hurt before, maybe you've seen promises broken, or you've had your trust shattered in the past, and so now the idea of testing feels like control. It feels like a way to prevent history from repeating itself, but here's the hard truth. Testing doesn't protect you from pain, it just prevents you from experiencing real closeness. Because while it might catch a lie here and there, what it definitely does is block the kind of trust that makes love worth having. The alternative isn't blind trust, it's clear communication. Instead of setting traps to see if he'll fail, set expectations so he knows how to succeed. Instead of holding back affection to measure his reaction, give love freely and watch how he handles it. You learn far more about a man by trusting him than you do by testing him. Because trust isn't about guaranteeing that he'll never hurt you. It's about giving him the chance to show you who he really is without the weight of suspicion on his shoulders. And let's flip it around for a moment. Imagine if he was the one testing you. Imagine if he constantly created little scenarios to check if you were loyal, if you cared, if you'd stay. How long would it take before you felt like you were under a microscope instead of in a relationship? How long before you started to resent the fact that your love had to be proven instead of simply received? That's the same way he feels. Tests don't draw people closer, they push them away. At the end of the day, real love doesn't need tests, it needs trust. And if you want a man to lean in, to give his heart fully, then show him that your love isn't something he has to earn over and over. Show him it's something he can trust to be steady. Because the more you trust him, the less he feels like he has to prove himself. And the more freely he'll give you the very loyalty you were looking for all along. Because no man pulls away from trust. He pulls away from the constant feeling that love has to be proven like it's a test he might never pass. One of the most overlooked behaviors that pushes men away isn't loud or obvious, it's quiet. It's when you slowly start neglecting your own growth. And the tricky part is, it doesn't happen all at once. At the beginning of a relationship, you're full of life. You've got hobbies, passions, friends, dreams that make your eyes light up when you talk about them. That's part of what drew him in, your energy, your independence, your sense of self. But over time, sometimes without even realizing it, all of that gets pushed aside. Suddenly, the focus shifts almost entirely to him. What he's doing, how he feels, where the relationship is going. And while that might feel like love, what it actually does is create an imbalance that makes him feel like he's carrying both of you. Here's what most people don't realize. Men are not only attracted to love, they're attracted to life. They want to be with someone who's growing, who's curious, who's excited about her own world, not just his. When you lose yourself in the relationship, he doesn't feel flattered. He feels pressured, because now he's not just your partner, he's become your entire source of fulfillment. And no matter how much he cares, that's a weight too heavy for anyone to carry. Think about it. When you first met, it wasn't your dependence that pulled him in. It was your presence. It was the way you lit up when you talked about something you loved. It was the confidence that came from having your own lane, your own identity. And when that fades, the relationship starts to feel less like a partnership and more like responsibility. Instead of being inspired by your growth, he feels drained by your absence of it. And that quiet shift is enough to make him slowly pull back, not because he doesn't care, but because he misses the version of you who was fully alive. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't invest in the relationship. Of course you should, but investing in him should never mean divesting from yourself. A healthy relationship isn't about losing your identity. It's about bringing two whole, growing people together to build something stronger. When you keep pursuing your goals, when you nurture your friendships, when you continue to evolve as a person, you're not pulling away from him. You're actually pulling him closer. Because men are drawn to women who shine in their own right, not women who dim their light to orbit around his. And let's be real, nobody wants to feel like someone's entire happiness depends on them. That's not love, that's pressure. What keeps attraction alive is the balance between closeness and independence. When he sees you thriving on your own, he doesn't feel unnecessary. He feels lucky. Lucky that he gets to be part of your life, not all of it. Lucky that he has a partner who chooses him, not one who needs him to fill every empty space. So here's the truth. Your growth is not a threat to the relationship. It's fuel for it. The more you develop yourself, the more you have to bring to the table, the more you chase what excites you, the more energy you bring into the connection. And the more you keep becoming the person you're meant to be, the more he's reminded of why he fell in love with you in the first place. Because in the end, men don't pull away from a woman who's growing. They pull away from the silence, the stillness, the sense that she's lost herself along the way.